Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to the Elevated Frequency Podcast, episode 21. My name is Shannon Morse, and I'm here with my lovely co founder and soul sister, Lisa Kirby.
Hello, hello. I love that intro. It just makes me so happy.
Yes, me too. We were kind of giggling before because it kind of sounds like something from The Lion King. It's a great vibe. So welcome everyone. We're able to stream on a few more platforms today, so this will be kind of a test for us. So if you don't hear us responding, it's only because we can't see you. And so we're just going to go right into our topics. So one of the things that has been a very hot topic, both in our day-to-day life and the past year and a half, perhaps specifically. And then also a huge topic within our community is hormone health and balance and circadian rhythm and light overall. And what's been really cool for myself as the business sister of Lisa is to basically to watch you go through your own really awesome discovery over the last, I would say, like ever since we had our retreat in Mexico. Was that 2022?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
wild. 2
Yeah.
years.
And I've seen you go through this like really beautiful evolution of discovery and of course trying out different things, just like we support everyone to do in their own lives. Don't take our word for it. Like try some things out for yourself and learn what it is for you specifically, because it's going to be different. So I don't even know where to start here, but maybe the first question that we can have is, over the last, let's just call it 2 years, what have been some of the really incredible things that you've discovered about yourself and your own body as it relates to what brings you into balance that you weren't aware of before?
Yeah, it's such a great question and great topic because, traditionally my approach to everything really was like harder, faster, overdo it, with everything from work to relationships to making money to exercise to nutrition. I'm just going to over restrict. I'm going to do everything to the max and more because that's better. And the more I kind of, have educated myself, and of course, like the first kind of awakening was meeting you, Shan, and learning about nutrition science. And it was just this, what we talk about so much is like, a lot of this stuff intuitively. But I think for some people, like for my brain, I have to know the why to be really motivated to like integrate it into my lifestyle. So I always knew like, yes, protein is important. But once I learned like, here's what happens when you don't eat enough protein, I'm like, wow, I have less energy. My muscles look flat, my just overall mood and blood sugar is all out of whack. So I really like learning the why and behind all of these things, all of these health protocols and habits, just to motivate me to integrate it. So learning that first piece with nutrition is so important in terms of hormones because it's going to regulate your, to a large extent, it's going to regulate your insulin. And regulating your insulin, I didn't know at the time, is like so intricately involved in regulating blood sugar and your mood. So it's like this direct correlation right off the bat of mental health, your mood, and blood sugar. And over time, it's almost like not so much what I've added into my life, but just like kind of like let go of. So letting go of this mentality that more is better. And it's taken me a long time to get to this place of like, it's a lot of it for me is like faith and trust. Trusting that what I'm doing is enough. Like the training we're doing, Lisa, that's enough. You don't need to like add on like burpees in between your, weightlifting sets. You don't need to add like 5-mile runs to every single day because you're trying to hit this number of steps. Like it doesn't work like that. What I noticed in particular was after turning 40, I would start to see like, wow, I felt immediately that more was not better.
Mm-mm.
And
Contraindicative.
yeah, it was like, I thought, oh, that doesn't apply to me. But after 40, I was like, okay, like it's happening. I can feel the shift where my body's like, girl, you need to rest.
Mm-hmm.
Always been the one that just like you push through everything. So right around the same time, a lot of our members are growing with us
Mm-hmm.
and evolving with us. And so they're in their 40s now and they're like, whoa, what I did in my 30s is just not working anymore.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm finding is really being intentional about the big rocks that actually move the lever for in terms of health and weight management and homeostasis in the body. That's where the focus needs to go, and kind of letting the obsessions of these other small things that don't really make a big impact, just kind of letting that go to the wayside. So that's kind of like the overarching.
But it's great. It's great because it brings in the bigger perspective. And as you're sharing that, of course, there's like so many paths of topics that we could go through. But I always think about what's going to be most valuable for the listener in these situations. And one of the things that comes to mind is helping individuals to understand that whatever your body is sharing with you right now, it's a compounding response over years and years of what you've been telling your body that it, quote unquote, should be doing. So if you've had compounding years of working indoors, if you've had compounding years of pushing your body to the max, you're going to essentially be giving your body this information that says, yo, we're going to be in a fight or flight state all the time. And then the body's going to have to adapt to that on a cellular level to withstand the stressor that would be now chronic. And so I think when individuals are coming to us and they're sometimes going like, well, why isn't this happening faster, or et cetera, we really get a chance to zoom out and go, well, what have you been doing the last 10 years?
Right.
Like, what medication have you been on? What has your training looked like? How much sitting time have you had? Has your work environment looked like? Your sleep wake cycles? Like, are you a nurse? Is your schedule all over the place? Um, like all of those things are just pieces of the puzzle that will make up this very intricate experience. And as we talk about, hormones and circadian health and things like that, of course, we can look at ancestral, what our ancestors did. But I think even closer, we can look at our parents.
Yeah.
And kind of just the lifestyle changes that we've come to experience over the course of just the last 40 years.
Absolutely.
It's massive.
I even just think about when just from the beginning of the iPhone blowing up around 2010.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now it's like I still can remember. I remember poignantly like life before computers, life before cell phones, and then life before iPhones.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's hard to think back for some of us of like, oh my gosh, I wasn't up on my little phone screen all night or looking at this thing that has massive artificial blue light and is pumping cortisol to my brain at 6 a.m. when I'm supposed to be still sleeping and have melatonin production. So I think what's happening now is the science is now catching up with the aftermath of some of this like technology and modern lifestyle, like almost cause and effect that we didn't really foresee coming. It's like the science is now catching up to that of like, hey, this is not great. And here's the impact that has collectively within the bigger picture. So it's never just one thing. And that's what we've been talking about this week in our newsletter and in our community. You can't really look at anyone's health, like state of health or body or transformation and be like, that's the golden thing. She cut carbs and that's it. So if I do that, I'm going to look exactly the same. Number one, you're not going to look exactly the same. Please stop and like own your own divinity and beauty. And number two is like, you can't pinpoint any one thing because we are so beautifully complex and multi-layered. So I've had a lot of people reach out to me and be like, what have you been doing?
Mhm.
Like seeing changes in your body. I was like, I've been doing these things and could not tell you it was this one thing.
Mhm.
One of the biggest things I've been working on very intentionally with myself, my husband, and our therapist is cortisol reduction and stress management. We have been really intentionally focusing on that since end of 2022.
Mhm.
And not surprisingly, when you consciously resolve, anything, especially in your day-to-day life in your home, when you resolve some of that big stress, you're going to see a difference in your body. Like,
100%. Mhm. Yep.
and I like if you think about some of the stuff we were dealing with at the time, like some financial stress and relationship stress, and just kind of like childcare stress,
Mhm.
both working these, insane hours at the time and not having that time for connection, like that has an impact on your hormones. And
Mhm.
so I think, unfortunately, things like carbohydrates get a really bad rap for insulin resistance and blood sugar spiking when part of it is your exposure to blue light and your just amount of stress in your life period.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's eh, yeah, it oh, there's so many things to speak into here. It's interesting because, we're talking about some of this stuff as if it's like new, but it's not new. Even with like Ayurveda, it's the first thing that they look at is our thoughts and how our thoughts create the chemical reaction in our body, and the chemical reaction in our body affects everything else. And so when we're operating on a daily basis from the container of scarcity or fear, and it produces that cortisol, even the idea that you were talking about in the beginning of not doing like the workout not being hard enough,
Right.
right? And when we have new members start with our programs and they're like, having sometimes a paralyzing fear of I'm not doing this right.
Yep.
And the if you think about that occurring one area of your life, then you can only imagine how the impact is going to infiltrate every other area of your life, because it can't be separate. It doesn't really work that way. So then when we're able to heal even the practice of going like, you know what, that is enough for me right now. I can just be in that place of trust, as you said. I can do the trust fall and I'll be like, you know what? I'm just going to try it out and assume that this is going to be enough. And then allow yourself to stand back as an observer and watch how your body responds without being so like, I think this is where, especially with our information age, we get so overwhelmed with thinking of the latest study, the latest stat, that we forget that our body is giving us all of the signals that it really requires.
Yeah.
Like, our body freaking intelligent, the smartest thing out of anyone's like logical brain. We don't even know how the brain works, and somehow we're all like, well, this study over here says this
Right.
thing, and it's like, well, but that's today. Who knows what it's going to say in 2 weeks or
Right.
tomorrow? They could have a whole new study and we're going to be like, oh my god, now that's the new truth.
Right.
But all of these things just continues taking us away from knowing ourselves so fully that we're like, oh my gosh, my stomach doesn't feel good. I wonder why that is. I wonder what I did earlier today. I wonder what the food was. Maybe I'll try this tomorrow and see if I have the same response. And so I think that's one thing where it's like, as we're going through recognizing, and I love that this conversation is like in this encompassing section of stress, and which has to do with like thoughts and chronic behavior patterns and things like that. And then really giving people an opportunity to try things out. And this is just what I've watched you do, and be
Yeah.
like, well, I mean, maybe I don't need to run like every day.
Right.
And maybe I'm going to try something else out, but I can see what my body does. And then the more you track data, like we'd like to do in our, nerdy platforms, the more we can actually see, oh, that worked in that way for me. And so it's fascinating. Okay. But I want to make sure that I'm going back to some things because there's so many questions to ask you.
It's so good. And like, even to that, Shannon, what might work at one point seasonally
Mm-hmm.
may not be great in the winter. So like maybe
Mm-hmm.
running when you're eating more and you have more sunlight and it's naturally a time of more abundant energy, like that's a great time to ramp up your cardio. But in the
Absolutely.
winter, when I was pushing it in 2022, it was such a mismatch and I kept pushing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like my body just, I literally I could like touch my, have you ever like had that much inflammation? Probably not. I had so much inflammation, it was like I could touch my skin and it was like puffy. Like
Mm.
like I could touch it and there was like an indentation and it would like take a second to respond.
Oh, that's a fascinating biofeedback.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And of course I ignored it, and it's like, I love the analogy that you use so often because you inspire me regularly to this day to slow down, like check in with myself,
Mm.
ground, and just come from a place of an awareness. Because it's like you have your body and all these signals, just like a car, you've got your dashboard with all these signals. And it's like, do you know what those mean? And if you keep ignoring them and you're like, nah, like the gas is on empty, like I'm just going to keep driving and wait until your body, your car has this massive breakdown. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's what we as humans tend to do, or at least, traditionally, for in my experience, it's
Mm-hmm.
wait till your body reaches rock bottom and is just an absolute mess and then take action.
Yes.
You don't have to do that.
No, and to that point, I want to make sure to share this as well because some individuals haven't had this cycle of like feeling fairly good and then like something happening in their life and all of a sudden stress takes hold and they're not paying attention. For some people, they have been in a state of chronic stress for the majority of their life
Yeah.
and they're not even aware of it. And so for those individuals, this kind of conversation may not be as accessible for you to um, connect with immediately. And if that is the case, and some individuals that I can think that might be in that category are individuals who have worked under fluorescent lights for the majority of their life. They don't get outside very often. They're not in nature settings very often. Individuals who are in food deserts.
Mhm.
So eating highly processed food, they've never really experienced what it would feel like to run an engine that is running on premium octane.
Yeah.
So we have some of these other aspects, and there's nothing right or wrong. But with that, you may not yet realize how good you can feel when some of these changes are made, and your biofeedback signals might take a little bit longer to start to activate. And so just understanding that that is a possibility, because of course we've had so many people that we've worked with where even in our group settings, let's say that we have 15 people in the group and 10 of them are like, oh yeah, I totally noticed that I was feeling like so energized and my mood is great and I'm sleeping like a log. And you have these people that are having like this wonderful biofeedback. And then you have like 2 or 3 people who are like, I don't feel anything.
Yeah.
And it's okay. So if you haven't just had an experience to be in tune in that way, you're not wrong or broken
No.
at all. It's just perhaps going to take a little bit more time because of how much time your body's been used to kind of turning off those signals. So it's just, I always want to like come into like the perspective of who's listening and all of these different, we're all coming from a different place. And what has been so cool watching your journey, Lise, is that what works for you is you're making it so specific for you.
Mhm.
You're making it so like, you know what, I like this is working for me right now.
Yeah.
And looking at the seasonality of things, and that part is so cool. And I want to make sure that we go into like the light real quick before I forget.
Yeah.
So I remember when you were here in the summer and I was looking at your your iPhone and I was like, yo, what's wrong with your iPhone? And you have a blue light blocking thing on it. And I
Yes.
was like, oh, let me get some of that. So I think it's really helpful for people to know that you can change the setting on your phone. You want to share a little bit about that and why?
Yeah. So again, kind of tying it back into, constantly, ever learning and evolving and adapting. And so I had reached this place where, it was during the winter and things I was doing in the summer right before just stopped working. And I was very, very stressed. And I was starting to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. And to be honest, I thought I was in perimenopause. I'm like, oh, it's happening. I've been dreading this day and it's like happening. Like, what do I do? But the more I dove into educating myself about hormones, I really started to resonate with this idea of starting at the top and starting with looking at your top tier hormones instead of isolating. Again, this is what we do with nutrition and training. We're starting at what are the biggest movers? What are the biggest levers that we can work with here that are going to have the biggest impact? And what I learned really quickly was, instead of obsessing about lab tests and going straight to hormone replacement therapy and obsessing about estrogen and progesterone, I was like, well, what turns those on? And then I'm like, okay, well, that turns that on. Well, what turns that thing on? And then I kept going up the scale and I'm like, oh my God, it all starts with your circadian rhythm and your access to natural, unobstructive sunlight. And you're going to hear this more and more. Like, it's super popular right now. Like Andrew Huberman podcast, like he's talking about it. A lot of other practitioners are talking about health and hormone balance coming from this top tier perspective. And I think, again, it's because we have, like you're saying, this compounding effect of like most people living this modern lifestyle of living indoors and working indoors, and 2020 didn't help anybody. Now we're starting to see the impact of that. So I got into this because my stress was so high, I gained weight, and I thought I was in perimenopause, and my appetite was out of control. Like it was like I was eating 2,500 calories a day. And I was like, I am not satisfied. Like, what is going on? And once I started to learn about, how sunlight starts to regulate all your hormones from this top down approach, I made the commitment in 2023, in about January, to start my day watching the sunrise and making that the first light I see. So what I normally would do, and guiltily, with so much guilt and shame, wake up. I know intuitively, we all know it's not smart to wake up and go straight to your phone. Like, we know better, but why do we do that, right? So for me, when I learned, this max blue light, when that's your first exposure in the morning, not only mentally not a good idea to start your day spamming yourself with emails and work stress, like we know better, but also this sends a high cortisol signal on top of that, just from the blue light. So artificial blue light in this concentrated amount, it's like fake light, fake food. Think of it as processed, right? And it doesn't have the healing spectrum of red light that's available with sun. And so that little shift, I was like, you know what? I'm going to start my day with a sunrise walk, and I'm going to stack it with a walk, because we all know walking is also intuitively really good for us, right? Like that shift alone, just think about the cascade of effects in your whole entire day by switching from stress, cortisol to almost like this beautiful, spiritual, nourishing, meditative practice of going for a walk at sunrise.
Absolutely.
Like, it's a game changer. And just hormonally, what it does is it slowly increases your cortisol and starts to turn off melatonin. Whereas before, you're like looking at your phone and staying indoors, 12 p.m. or later some days is what I used to do. And that tells your body, either if you have a lot of blue light exposure in that sense, you're going to have a really high cortisol response very quickly. And then most people pour gasoline on the fire with like coffee on an empty stomach. And then it's like cortisol. And then if you're not getting any sunlight or outside fresh air at all until later in the afternoon, you're just missing these key points where sunlight needs to get directly through the eye, like not blocked by sunglasses
Mm-hmm.
or contact lenses or anything, to start that proper hormone production for the day.
It's
And
so
so
good.
I'd love for you to share, Shan, because you have been intuitively doing this, you know, while working, and just like it's been a part of your lifestyle for so long.
Yeah, it's as you've been sharing more about your discoveries, I've been reflecting a little bit more on the things that I've just done naturally or intuitively. And even I think about, we're in a house that's fairly new that we moved into this year. But the first thing that I'll do, like right now it's snowing outside, and I'm sorry, but I don't really feel like walking outside in the snow first thing in the morning when it's like under 10 degrees. But I do notice that the first thing that I do intuitively is I walk to the window and watch the sunrise. And then I'll go outside, just breathe in the fresh air and experience that. And that's just kind of what my body's like. I need to like it I don't even, it's not even conscious.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, this is the first thing on my habit checker today. And I'm going to, so that is intuitive. I'm naturally a person that likes to move my body. Like another thing that is intuitive for me is when I'm done eating a meal, I do not like to keep sitting.
Yeah.
I like to jump my booty out of that seat and I like to be moving. I feel uncomfortable actually, like at a cellular level. I just feel a little like, I don't want to sit right now. I want to move. Like I just fueled my car. Why would I just be sitting here? So that's something that's been intuitive. And as you and I were discussing, in our last house here in Nashville, my office was on our porch. And I would spend 8 hours in the dripping, sweaty heat. My poor computer, my good little Mac. Good job, my friend. Just sitting outside, loving it, loving every single moment. If it was cold, I would be like, okay, let's get like a little, like some bundled up here. But that was just where everything in my body wanted to be. And so I didn't really have to think about it so much. And I think this is really where we can kind of, and also my phone, it does not live in our bedroom. My phone is in the bathroom. So I don't sleep with that thing in the room. And for the majority of what I can remember, my phone was never next to my bed. It was always further away, not because I knew that it should be,
Right.
but because I knew
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
if it was next to my bed, has nothing to do with light. If it was next to my bed, I would do this. And I would hit the snooze button and I would be asleep again.
Right.
So now I know that I have to get out of bed physically and turn off that alarm. And what that asks me to do is I get out of bed, I turn off the alarm, I go get my light, and I jump right into the shower. And that, all of it is supportive of so many things.
Yes.
And I think that's really where I come back, and I feel very fortunate that both of my parents were very much the types of parents who would ask me, well, what are you hungry for? Well, what is your body asking you for? And so I was taught from a very young age, well, ask your body, like tune in with your own signals. And that's not what we've been generally taught, especially in our health field. And really in our school overall, right? It's not about like, well, what do you think the answer is? It's
Oh
like,
my gosh. Thank you for saying that, because our kids go to a Montessori school, and I was talking to one of the teachers, and she was saying she can always tell kids who have come to the Montessori school from like a public school, and in the public schools, they have to ask to take care of themselves. They have to ask to eat. They have to ask to use the bathroom. And so one of the things that they teach the kids is checking in with their bodies. Well, you don't need to ask me permission for that. Like, you have a signal from your body that's really important to take care of. Like, you take care of that. Like, you don't need to ask anyone permission for that.
That's
And
amazing.
it gives me goosebumps, because you are spot on. It's like, how did I get to this point? How did our clients how did we as a human species get to this point where we've been ignoring these intuitive signals, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about those times, I'm like, what are the times when I've just naturally felt like my weight was at a place of homeostasis, my mood was good? I always associate that with summer. And
Mm.
when now for my brain, I'm like, oh, now I know why, because I'm outside, I'm getting that fresh air.
Mhm.
I'm in the sun. When I see the sun and I'm like working, I'm like, I got to go outside. You know,
Mhm.
it's like it's an itch. Like I just feel like a goblin sitting inside all day when it's sunny, but
Yeah.
I never pushed those. I never leaned into those practices in the winter, or, you know, when
Mm.
the weather would change and the seasons would change. I'd wake up and be like, I'm not going outside. It's gray,
Mhm.
cloud. And so now, like, pushing through that initial discomfort, and now I hear the signs and the signals. I can feel it now. My body's like, "What are you doing? Like, go outside." So
Mhm.
it's like I don't have to force that anymore, but I needed that. Just same thing with nutrition. It's like you almost need that baseline
Mhm.
so that you can feel, okay, oh, this is what it feels like to have balanced hormones. This is what it feels like to have balanced blood sugar.
Mhm.
Um, this is what it feels like to have, you know, normal and insulin response,
Mhm.
low cortisol. And then once you have that foundation set, then you know, oh, this is off, right?
Right.
So that, like, again, you're spot on. It's like these are all things that we intuitively know. And now it's like putting just a little layer of education of like, well, here's why that's really important. And what also really spurred me into like further educating myself on this more was that some of our clients, I was like, well, like to your point, why do some of these things work so well and work so quickly with some people and not with others?
Mhm.
Can't necessarily pinpoint one thing. And I think a lot of it has to do with emotional trauma and some like conditioning and things
Mhm.
that we're storing in our tissues.
Mhm.
I think
Yes.
that's a huge part of it. And that also can come from just like a chronic stress response. And think about it, like the energy behind it is like a holding on.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a holding.
Yes. And so
Mhm.
I think like between that, and some of these other aspects, it's like that's what spurred me of like, okay, if there's how can we make everyone more responsive? Like, how can we make the human body a little bit more responsive? So, some of these key practices of watching the sunrise, of taking more light breaks, and getting your body outside and getting that exposure in all weather and temperatures is it's so simple, but
Mhm.
such a huge impact.
Oh, absolutely. And as we were, I'm going to kind of circle back to what you were sharing before, that there is an aspect of like seasonality as well. I really believe that, like where you're like maybe running and doing these intense activities are great for the summer when you have more fuel and more access to sunlight and all these things. And then there's also this element where if we are actually living within the seasons, there's a lot of rest that's available for us in the winter. We don't need to be going out and doing all the things, and we don't need to be staying up into the moments of the night. And we actually perhaps don't need to be working out as much. And so just kind of allowing ourselves to have a natural flow with the cycles that are in our environment, wherever that environment might be. And, this is the first time that we've lived in a place that has snow.
Right.
And snow is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Does it make you really want to go outside like multiple times a day? Not really.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you can't get outside and you can't get fresh air and you can't like have that experience. And it's just a different type of stimulus. And so I think just the overarching theme here is that one thing isn't going to be necessarily the best thing for you throughout the course of your life. That it's really our opportunity as incredible machines to exactly what you're saying, see if we can find that stabilized baseline. And when we say that, for those of you who don't like understand this vocabulary that we're using, because to us it makes so much sense, we're like your stable baseline.
Right.
It means that you're doing something consistently over a period of time, even if that period of time is just a week, just 7 days, you're doing it consistently. And when we say consistently, that you're actually doing it consistently, which means you're tracking it and you actually know that you're doing it. It's not like, oh, I think I had more protein. I had more protein, right? Was that more protein? We actually need to have like the data, and that's where we can use technology and our biofeedback and then make them work together, because with that data we can assess, oh, okay, that actually felt pretty good, and now I know that that's the amount of protein that I require to feel that specific way, and I want to repeat that outcome. But when we don't have that stable baseline that we're actually like knowing, not because we're guessing, then we're really going to be able to start to track and go, okay, I know that worked for me, right? And for those of you who have never done this before, it might feel tedious in the beginning. You know, you're having to like just, it requires more effort initially to track stuff, whatever that tracking might be. And I think if you can just go into it knowing that it's going to feel a little bit more tedious and it's going to require a little bit more of your time, attention, and energy, and that will pay dividends tenfold once you have that data that is unique information for your unique body that you're going to have for the rest of your life, then it starts to have a different flavor to it, which is more, this is the user manual that I'm developing for my own unique body. And I'm literally writing it as I'm tracking.
I love that. So good.
It's true. It's like we're writing our own user manuals.
Yes. And amen to bringing that empowerment back to you as the individual, and like stop the outsourcing. I think that's what's so interesting. You know, this is so relevant for us right now because we're in the middle of a group coaching program, is that, you know, people still want to be told what to do, right?
Yeah.
You tell, I know. And it's like when people like some questions, it's like, how many calories does like are in protein? You know, it's like, okay, protein is 4 calories per gram. There's some questions that have like simple answers, but there's so much to health and wellness that is so nuanced and so bio-individual. And I kind of laugh sometimes, or like some of the questions, I'm like, God, are we saying it depends is the answer to like
every question? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, God, how annoying is that? But also, like, it's so empowering because it brings the power back to you of like, oh, well, I'm going to try this and then I'm going to check in with myself. And maybe it works. Maybe it works in this amount, in this type, in this way for me at this time of year, but maybe not right now. Or, you know, and we get to be flexible. We get to adapt. I love that. We're writing our own user manual to our bodies that we, you know, maybe weren't born with or taught for a lot of us.
Yes. And I think it's such a big conversation. It's a big conversation, and it's also incredibly simple, because the way in which our culture is essentially built is that we need to look for the answers outside of ourselves in every way, shape, or form. You know, that's how our general school system is programmed. That's how our medical field is programmed. It's like everything is outside of ourselves. Consumerism.
Yeah.
Just being us isn't enough. We need to buy all these things to make us enough. And it's just never enough. But what is inherent in that is that, well, we will never feel like we're enough in that state. And so with this kind of opportunity to transition to look within and understand how our unique body works, this is a thought that came to mind the other day, was that if we don't know ourselves, then how can we ever know anything else?
Yeah.
Like if we don't know the one thing that we are in relationship to every single second of the day, how can we know anything else in this world? It's like it is the first thing and really the only thing that we ever really need to understand.
Yeah.
Like the rest is going to be changing. It's just going to be doing its thing. But we have the opportunity to learn us every single second of the day. And most of us never look there. we look to all of the other, well, what is she doing? Or what is he doing? Or what are they telling me to? Or what does this Instagram person say? Or what does that study say?
Mm.
Instead of just, going into the deeper reflection and doing our own work. And I think sometimes that's the issue, is that sometimes we just want to be told what to do because it's so nice.
Yeah.
Easy. Yeah.
And that's how we've been trained. I mean, we get questions from, so many people on social media. What do you think about this random person saying this about this? And I'm like, well, what do you think? Do,
Great question. Yeah.
what do you think about this very extreme statement? A lot of this stuff is so extreme and it's so polarized and it's so it's coming from a place of like one very particular subset of the human population that it's applicable to. And we're just going to say it's true for everyone. And it's like, yeah, you know what? That's great for social media algorithms. But
Yes.
like, is that true for you?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I actually just saw an account this morning scrolling through, and it caught my eye. I'm going to say it was very catchy
Yeah.
because the individual had excellent lighting. They had a very professional setup. Their editing was on point. And, of course, my brain is like, oh, shoot, should we be doing that? Like, do we need to get like the highest of the highest technology and the highest like editing and all of this stuff to make us look like we know what we're talking about? Is that what we need to be doing? But when I was feeling the energy behind what this individual was saying, it was so polarizing.
Mm.
It wasn't giving the listener an opportunity to decide for themselves or to decide what that meant for them. If anything, I kind of left that 30 seconds going like, oh shit, am I doing the right thing? It was like, it was like, well, this is what we know. And this is what our ancestors did. And because they did this 1,000 years ago, that this is why our, DNA works like this, and how the signaling of the genes and then I kind of went into my intuitive knowing and how I know my personal body to have responded through different stimulus. And I look at that and I'm like, that could be true for a percentage of individuals,
Yeah.
but it's not going to be accurate for the masses. And so I think that's where it gets so tricky right now, because we are in an over consumption of information. It's just like so much. And if you are someone listening to this right now going like, yeah, it is so much, just know that you're right. And I think that's where you can take the power back in doing your own research, tuning in with yourself and bringing in that consistency. Like, you will not go wrong if you try something out for yourself. Notice how your body responds and then make small adjustments to see what's going to work or not work better.
Exactly. And I think you're really pinpointing what we do in our programming is like, we give you kind of like these bumper lanes of the basics. Here's the simple basics of like universal things, which are not a lot.
Mm.
It's not a lot. It's like, protect your muscle mass. You need protein, you need fiber. It's like things that are like universally, like we know to be true for like most humans. But there's so much variance in between there. Like, oh, you like a little bit more fat than carbs? Cool. Oh, like you live this lifestyle and you're not able to be outside all day? Totally get it. You have a freaking job. You're paying a mortgage. You've got kids. Great. The next best option is take a 5-minute break, pop outside when you can. I think a lot of this information can make you feel really bad. It can make you feel really guilty, or just like, this thing is unattainable. Like, this health is unattainable in our modern lifestyle. And I have to drop everything and move to Costa Rica and, live by the equator in order to be healthy. It's like,
In the blue zone.
for some people, maybe, but like,
Mhm.
what are 10 steps back from that? Like, what can you do now in this moment? And for some people, it's just simple things of like taking those breaks, going for a short walk, doing these like little, like small lifestyle changes and implementing those and doing it consistently and seeing how you feel. I had one client contact me recently on Instagram, and she was like, I'm just in this place. I've gained a little weight. I'm just feeling, not in my body. And she's like, can you just inspire me? Like, give me one thing. Like, what's one thing I can do? I was like, walk. I'm like, don't change anything. I'm like, go walk. I'm like, get your walking in, get outside, get fresh air, like feel just like back in your body. And she comes back a week later and she was like, I've been walking every day. I feel amazing. I've already lost weight. I was like, great. So it's kind of like moving away from these like sensationalism and this extremism and just like coming back to the basics.
Mm-hmm.
If you have, I think in general, if you have a guide or a coach or a mentor who is like very dogmatic and telling you this is the only way, and if you don't do this, like you're not going to be healthy or see results, like that to me is kind of a red flag. I think you need someone that's going to work with you and be more catering to your lifestyle, your situation, your preferences,
Mm-hmm.
or bio individuality.
Absolutely. Yes. Amen. As we're talking about this too, I was thinking about doing this in the new year, but I think this podcast is more appropriate, which is kind of sharing some of the things that we've found have worked for us over the course of the years as like a either seasonal or like weekly, like the things that we do either intuitively or the things that we've discovered. To give people ideas of what it could look like and the things that have worked over a period of time. And I'll give you kind of an example of what I'm thinking about. So before I started my whole journey with strength training in a balanced way and with nutrition in a balanced way, it was around, I think it was around 26 when I started to understand how my body really needed to strength train. And with that understanding, I understood the rest that was required. But since around 26, I wanted to share the things that I've found that have worked for me in terms of training. And so this is what I found, and rest, like the whole ecosystem of like moving the body. So I found that if I do some really heavier lifting 2 days out of the week, it's enough.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't really need to train heavy more than 2 days a week. I also found that running isn't actually ideal for my body, that it causes inflammation. But short sprints are pretty stellar. And so a cadence that I came into with in my late 20s, early 30s was 2 heavier strength training days, a couple days of aerial, and then a sprint day or a long walking day. And generally with clients during that time, I would walk outside at least 45 minutes every single day because I was with clients. And so that was just ingrained into my daily life. And that was part of it. I would get a massage once a week because my body needed it. And I also did hair mineral analysis testing probably every 2 years, where I would get my hair tested. I would see the imbalances of, my mom does this, which makes it a lot easier. I would see the imbalances of toxic metals, heavy metals, different ratios of like sodium, potassium that were off, and seeing the trends. And then I would be able to reflect on how I felt in my body based on those trends. So even from my mid-20s, I was already kind of tuning in with like this deeper cellular feedback. And I remember specifically feeling like absolute crap, hair falling out in my mid-20s and getting the results back. And I was in very low adrenal fatigue. So I went through these supplements and doing some of the protocols, which was including red light therapy and things like coffee enemas. Mm-hmm. And like this whole thing. And over the course of really just 2 or 3 months, not only did I have emotional releases, which was a big part of what you were talking about before, the holding. So what we've noticed is that when we're holding deep emotional trauma and we're still holding in our body, and we're not actually allowing ourselves to just fully feel it and just like go like, I'm going to feel this completely, instead of going, I don't want to feel that.
Mhm.
So allowing ourselves to feel it completely. When I was actually able to really, really, truly do that, my body dropped like 15 pounds.
Yep.
I was like,
Who's
what? Just kind of like, oh, well, that was interesting. But of course, what you're saying as well is it's not just one thing. It's like they'll
Mhm.
all kind of compound together. So if I hadn't done some of the practices, like if I hadn't balanced out my training, and if I hadn't gone into like, having the right cadence of rest and like sunlight and things like that for myself, I may not have even gotten to a state where I was sensitive enough with my own biofeedback to be like, you know what, why is my hair falling out? And then be able to be like, maybe I need to understand that a little bit more deeply, and then go into, okay, I'm in adrenal fatigue, and then look to balance that out. And only then was my body in a place where it felt like it could safely feel the emotional release.
Mm.
So I think that there's a lot to be kind of shared about the little things that you and I have discovered over a period of time. Because just also for individuals to know that it didn't happen like overnight, that it's been through years and even decades of listening to the body and going through trial and error and the ups and downs. And we learn through absolutely every moment of it, creating our own user manual.
Yes. And I'm so glad you're talking about the like the impact of these other things on your mental and physical health because it all ties into hormones. And like just wanting to clarify, like your hormones are just these little chemical messengers that are they're fulfilling the user manual. They're fulfilling these processes in the body. So when we are doing too many things that are stressors, or we're holding on to too much trauma and we're just kind of holding everything in,
Mhm.
your little chemical messengers can't work as well. It's really as simple as that.
Mhm.
Um, so I think just really, making sure, just as we're talking about, we're looking at this from like a holistic standpoint.
Mhm.
Um, your hormones are always involved. And I think what's happening now, for why this is such a hot topic for women, especially women after age 35, is that your hormones, all hormones are naturally dropping after age 35. It's also when we start losing muscle mass if we're not already practicing these foundational healthy lifestyle habits. So
Mhm.
it's just exacerbated. And what we're finding now, my kind of my theory with like perimenopause and some of these hormone issues that are popping up, there is no one test for perimenopause. There's no test. It's just this term that we've come up with in modern times, I think,
Mhm.
to describe this series of symptoms that a lot of women are experiencing. And for men, it shows up as low T, right?
Mhm.
It's these terms that we've come up with because we're like, clearly, like, this is real. Like, women are going through something, men are going through something. They don't feel right in the body. Their
Mhm.
hormones are low. But
Mhm.
to me, it's not a be all end all diagnosis. There is so much you can do to bring balance and homeostasis in the body to where you might not have any symptoms, and you might just live happily ever after and be super strong and healthy, and like you don't have, it doesn't have to be this decline. So if anyone's feeling like, I turned 45 and I just, like, I don't know myself anymore, maybe it's 35, uh,
Mhm.
just know that there's so many layers and it's compounding, and it's kind of like looking at the bigger picture but not feeling defeated, and just knowing that the body is so responsive, it's so adaptable. Like, keeping that positive mindset is going to be so important.
Oh, yes. I'm so glad you touched on that. Oh my God, there's so much to talk about here. On that topic as well, and I'm completely with you. I feel like we've have this vocabulary now that's in perimenopause that has to do with, we don't know what else to call the stage in which the accumulatory lifestyle habits of us as females or males start to catch up with us when the body is transitioning into 40 plus.
Yep.
That's really what it feels like. It feels like the last 10 years or 40 years of your life, whatever you've been doing, we're going to show you, we as in your cells, are going to show you what we think about that, and the toxicity or the imbalance that might be a result of the lifestyle choices. And I remember my mom telling me in my teens or my 20s, like, that's not going to work out for you long term, like that's going to, like, in your 40s or in your 50s. And I remember my brain being like, that is so far away from where I am right now. That's not going to matter. Just tell me stuff I don't need to know right now. Sorry, mom. I'm sure all moms are like, oh gosh, this is the cycle of life. We have to figure
Yeah.
it out for ourselves sometimes.
Yes.
But I will say that I had this conversation with my mom recently, and Lisa, you and I have talked about it, where we were having just this group of our veteran members or our current members who were sharing symptoms of perimenopause, and they weren't aware. It was almost like it was a conversation that felt a little bit secretive, or like they felt guilty or shameful that they were having these experiences. It was like the energy was like, oh no, it's all
Mhm.
downhill from here. Like, oh no, it's happening to me. Like, oh no. And I was in Mexico with my brother's family and my mom, and I started asking her because she, of course, has dedicated a large portion of her life to health, and intuitive health specifically. And I asked her about perimenopause, and she was like, we didn't have that term when I went through menopause. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? She's like,
Right.
yeah, that term didn't exist. Like, what? Like, well, did you guys have symptoms? She's like, not that I remember. Like,
Yep.
there was nothing to call it because there was nothing that was really like happening. It was just like, you didn't have your period anymore. Okay. And I was shocked because we've grown up hearing about the transition or hot flashes and all of these symptoms that occur, but also in the time where, from our parents, my parents, your parents, from when they were going through that part of their life, that transitional period, there were so many factors that were so different in their environment.
Yeah.
Not to mention like vaccines and the medical field and medications and birth control,
Oh my God.
and just like all of these different factors that we can have to consider now that weren't a factor before.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about, what you're talking about, what your experience has been over the last like 2 years, like where I've really seen you focus more fully on all of this, is really kind of unraveling all of the dogma that
Yeah.
said, you know what, you're going to get to 40 and it's going to suck.
Right. I'm such a rebel. I'm not kidding when I say like I've been preparing for menopause since I was 30 because I'm like, this sounds horrible. Like I don't want my life to just end. Like all of a sudden I can't, like attend, I don't know, like go hang out somewhere or like watch my kids play without like a hot flash and having to leave. I don't know. To me, I was like, this sounds really awful. Like I want nothing to do with, menopausal symptoms. And so what before all of that, so I would say even like 6 years ago now or 5 years ago now, I started looking into, just like hormonal health for, the menstrual cycle. I was
Mhm,
like,
mhm,
oh, if we fix that first,
mhm,
we're not going to have very many problems later in perimenopause. So if you
mhm,
use your cycle without being on birth control, if you can, if you use your cycle as like your feedback signal, like one of your vital signs as a female of how are things working in the body, how much homeostasis is happening here, I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. I was like, literally what I'm eating, what I'm thinking, how I'm moving, and my stress levels all impact my period. And I have control over that.
mhm.
That's what happened. Like everything changed for me when I met you and learned about nutrition and made these small changes and removing alcohol for 6 months and then drastically reducing alcohol to almost nothing nowadays. Like that was the biggest impact on my hormones at the get-go. So knowing that like there is this like direct impact of the inputs, what we
Mhm.
put in, our thoughts, what we eat, how we move, that does have an impact directly on our physical bodies, on our hormones. But like I think the takeaway is not feeling discouraged, but rather empowered that we can make these lifestyle choices and you can still have a really awesome, fun, happy life. Like, it's not like you need to be this like purist and live in this bubble and be afraid of all toxins. It's like, no, it's the opposite. It's how do I nourish and live vibrantly and am energized and magnetizing like this goodness in my life? Like, that to me is that full picture of health, instead of like, I need to
Yes.
be afraid of everything and everything's trying to kill me. Like,
Mm,
done with that narrative, you know?
mm. Yeah, because even that causes the mentality and the frequency of fear and scarcity. Or
Yes.
like you have to protect yourself against all of these external forces, which again uh, uh, positions the power outside of you.
Yep.
Instead of you going like, oh no, I'm actually gonna like I choose this because I choose it. I know that it's not the best, but the next thing I'm gonna do is gonna be better. It's gonna balance out.
I was just thinking the other day, I was like enjoying okay, I love a good Chick-fil-A cookie, like Chick-fil-A cookies. I am a cookie monster queen. I used to have a massive cookie addiction. Chick-fil-A cookies are the best cookies on the planet. There, I said it. Come at
Uh-huh.
me.
I haven't tried one. Now I'm gonna have to try it.
Oh my god. It's
We're
like
okay,
the
we'll see.
oatmeal and the chocolate chip and the texture and the bite and the size, like, it's a perfect.
Mm. Mm.
And, like, 1 to 2, like, two's pushing it, but, like, 1 is enough, and for me, I'm like, "Whoa," because most cookies, I'm like, "Eh, whatever, that wasn't that great." I don't even like them anymore. They just taste like cardboard. Okay, anyway, I digress. Chick-fil-A cookies are the absolute best. Do I know that they're full of maybe things that aren't great for me?
Mhm.
Sure, but the consciousness that I'm in now when I have that, I'm like, "This is the best cookie ever." Like,
Yep.
and I'm
Yep.
like, that frequency, that vibration is the most important. Like, that's gonna
Mm.
the state of my body that I'm putting myself in hormonally,
Mhm.
whatever, call it whatever you want. It has to do with your body. Um,
Absolutely.
I'm in this beautiful, like, abundant, joyful state eating that cookie. I'm not eating it thinking, "This is full of chemicals and, my body's so weak, I can't even, like, process this toxin." No. And so you're making these choices, like, intentional choices from an empowering place, and I think that's really the place we wanna be, is, like,
Mm.
we have that foundation of health, and most of my other meals are full of whole foods and protein and vegetables, um, like beautiful foods that are so nourishing. And I like a Chick-fil-A cookie every now and then. Okay.
Absolutely. And it's so good because there's also that aspect of if you're consuming something in a stress state, whether that stress is coming from your own, moderate to heightened stress state, your body's not going to digest that thing very well at all.
Okay.
So obviously our gut is responsive. It's integral for our hormones. And our serotonin and all of these different receptors that are occurring, and we're still learning so much about what's happening, but we can just feel it. When we're in a stress state, our gut doesn't feel good. Like we feel it in our gut. And so if we're having these moments where we're doing experiences like this in moderation with consciousness, and also with like feeling that whatever it is, whatever it's nourishing, like we talk about this so much, what feels nourishing for you, and not nourishment from a place that you're feeding a part of you that's fearful, and you're nourishing as a sense of protecting yourself against something. It's
Mhm.
not like nourishment like not locking your front door so there isn't someone to come in and steal something out of your house. It's nourishment in the sense of like, you know what, I really, really enjoy this. This reminds me of being with my kids. This reminds me of this. This is the perfect afternoon to like go through that drive-through at Chick-fil-A and just enjoy that freaking cookie. And oh, so good.
Yeah.
And I think that is where we get to also look at the bio individual aspect of what feels nourishing for you as an individual, and not because someone else told you to, not because an Instagram person said that that was the best thing for you to be doing and that that's the end all be all answer. But really, again, tuning in with yourself. And I think this is part of the challenge that we have with the way in which we've been taught, is that we continually bump up against, am I doing this right? Is this good enough? If I don't do this in the way that that person is doing this, I'm doing it wrong. Instead of asking ourselves and doing our due diligence and doing the initial legwork that says, I'm going to try this thing out. I'm going to do it consistently. I'm going to track. I'm going to see how my body responds. And then I'm going to make my decision.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm going to get second opinions.
Right.
And, and then I'll make more adjustments and like crowdsource a little bit, and I'll try something else. And what you're sharing before, Elise, that's really what we get to do as coaches, is not tell individuals what to do. Like when people ask for a meal plan, we're like, we don't give meal plans, because our role is to educate you to make them yourself. Because if we did that for you initially, and this is different because we have this other thing that we're working on with an AI coaching app. And so with that, it is actually going to be helpful to support with initial meal plans, to give you an example. But if you were to be told what to do the whole time, you would never be connected with the why it was important for your own unique body.
Right.
And so that's really where the coaching experience is so just transformative, because you're going to have a reflective mechanism for, well, how was that for you?
Mm-hmm. Even when you don't want that reflection.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like everyone needs to go through that one-on-one coaching experience, whatever the modality. It's going to be so powerful in any topic, but just like that, a really good one-on-one coach is going to help you just turn it back inward and use that time to reflect and be like, well, how's that working out for you?
Yeah. Like, what does your energy feel like? Are you feeling strong? How's your afternoon doing?
Yeah.
What's your coffee intake at about 3 p.m.?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty wild. Oh my gosh. We could keep going on and on about this topic, but yeah.
So
So
good.
good. Well, is there anything that you want to kind of like round it off with?
I think we touched on so much, as we always do. But I think in general, if you are, if you're feeling like you're doing anything and you're doing it consistently and you're practicing the basics, these foundations of, high protein, and you're getting vegetables in, and you just feel like it feels harder than it should be. Like where you just feel like your body's not responding, that's when, it might be helpful to look at, like, zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Like, how's the stress in your life? Are you getting outside? When you're outside, are you slathered in sunscreen and sunglasses? Because that's also going to block the light, right? So that's the time to kind of zoom out and look at some of those other things. And for most people, that's going to really manifest in the body after age 35. And so we'll be discussing this more in all of our programs and our community calls and tips on our Instagram page and whatnot. But I was thinking about it the other day. I'm like, the deeper we're in this like health and wellness space, it's just more and more apparent to me, like just how beautiful and spiritual this whole thing is, because it's so not isolated. It's the opposite of isolated. It's all interconnected and integrated, the mind, body, spirit. So if it sounds out there of like, really, like watching the sunrise is going to make me healthy, maybe not that one thing, but yes, it absolutely has an impact. Are the thoughts that I think having an impact on my stress levels? Yes, they are. Like, we're not even going to call that woo. That's just, it's truth.
Oh yes. Probably one of the bigger, most powerful aspects of overall health is the thoughts that we manifest. Oh yeah. Oh man, so good, you guys. And also, I always forget about this. Whenever we're doing podcasts like this, I just assume that everyone knows who we are if they're catching us. But if you don't, we are we're the Green Door Life, and we have a high touch coaching platform and program where our goal is really to have a base understanding of the science of nutrition, movement, and behavior change, paired with coaching to open up and kind of unveil your own unique biofeedback so that you really have these tools that you can use for yourself, have your own manual that you're writing for the rest of your life. And people work with us once and feel like they have what they needed or wanted. People come back in different phases, whether they've had surgery or pregnancy, or they just are in a different stage of their life. They're preparing for some sort of race and they want to kind of have like a different perspective on their nutrition and training for things like that. But really what we do overall, which I hope you can get through this conversation, is we're really supporting individuals to get the answers that work specifically for them. And it's not by telling them what to do, but more so opening up and holding the container that allows them to find out and discover what it is going to be for themselves. So that's what we get to do throughout the course of pretty much every day.
This is our struggle. It's like, how do you shrink that down and make it a like one-liner mission statement? I'm like,
right.
Oh gosh,
it's true.
It'll make me shorten it.
The struggle is real. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. We will be back next week as well. And until next time, stay healthy. Peace out.